Thank you. Very nice. Thank you so much. I put this together actually with the help of a doctoral student, of course, and I'll show you him in a minute. But anyway, I christened that bridge there the Dundee Bridge because of when I came to UNL, that's what CBA looked like, and that was the social science building. You understand, it wasn't even called CBA, social science building, and then of course that's the new building that we have broken ground for, and I'm calling that bridge there the Dundee Bridge, but I think she would call that the CBA alum bridge rather than her own. But anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. So let's just start on this journey a little bit, but before I do that, I do want to recognize and feel very gratified that you're all here. Of course, a lot of the students maybe have to be here. That's how we fill up the auditorium, you see. But on the other hand, I really do appreciate some really dear and old friends of mine that are here, and I'll mention you throughout, but you already mentioned Tim Clare's here, one of our regents, of course. Bill Rood kind of sprung on me. He's the president of Northern Iowa, and I was lucky to be at his installation, gave a few words when he was installed president of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls, and he's just been a great friend through the years. He used to take care of my kids when they were little, so he has some stories about that. So anyway, and of course all the rest of you, and of course my family mostly sitting up here in front, but a lot of familiar faces, and I really feel privileged that you took the time to come. So let's just get started on this journey, and that is, first of all, as Dante said, I am a native Iowan, and I was a loyal Hawkeye fan, because I have a lot of invested in the University of Iowa, believe me. Not Northern Iowa, but University of Iowa in Iowa City. So I was a hurdler on the track team, and did all that, and started dating my wife Kay here at Iowa. So that turned into a marriage of 52 years. I asked her, is it all right to say that we were married, happily married for 52 years? And she said, well, I don't know about the happy part, but that's true. I mean, that's a quote. I didn't make that up. So anyway, but I was a Hawkeye for sure, through and through, because I was going to all those games when I was 8 years old on, and 2 out of my 4 years as an undergraduate, we won the Rose Bowl for 2 out of my 4 years, and of course I was still wearing my Letterman's ring, so that's pretty deep roots. But until we played Nebraska in the 70s, and of course I came here in 1967, as I'll tell you in a minute. But I sat in the stadium over there in Iowa City, and I'm thinking, now, who am I going to go for? And Kate wasn't sure who I'd go for. But I sat there, and boy, there was no question. I went for Nebraska. Husker Red from then on. No question about it. I go to all the football games. I'm proud to say I think I've only missed 2 games in these 48 years, home games. All the basketball, men and women, and of course women volleyball and some of the baseball. So I'm a big Husker fan for sure. Everybody knows that. But anyway, I did my work at Iowa until 1965 when I graduated, and then I was lucky enough at that time to be the buildup of the Vietnam War, right? So in that 1965 period, I luckily had gone through ROTC. So I had a commission in the Army by the time I had to go in, okay? And of course, when I went into the Army, they had to give me a little polish, at least to sign me to West Point. Because I had my PhD, I taught leadership at Iowa. I tried to convince them that's where I should be assigned. Instead of going with all my classmates, they all went to Vietnam, and they got wiped out in that first big battle that actually was the movie with Mel Gibson, if you remember several years ago, called They Were Soldiers or something like that. They didn't come back, but I literally think my education saved my life. So you students remember that. Your education will do something for you. So anyway, I'm the guy on the left there. No, I'm not looking. I couldn't hold a candle to those cadets. I mean, they were all spit and polish and just really, first-class young men. And they only had no females at West Point at that time. So I enjoyed that. Kay and I both liked that a lot. And I learned a lot there. Then I came to Nebraska. I did a lot of searching around and tested the market out and had a lot of great offers, believe me or not. And, for example, University of Michigan, Columbia, because I'd gone there as a postdoc while I was at West Point. But I threw up my salary there just to show you what they paid me when I came here, $11,700. Now, people say, well, Fred, how do you make all this money you make now? Well, when you compound 2% over 50 years, it adds up, right? So that's how I got to be where I am. But I started at 11.7. Now, at the University of Nebraska, of course, like I said, we didn't have a management department. So we did have a College of Business, of course, and we did have two departments, Business Administration and Economics. So I was hired in what was called Business Administration, and then the year after I was here, they then divided them up into departments, including management. And guess who was my first chairman of the management department? My mentor at Iowa. Ooh, that's kind of fortuitous behavior that I have my mentor become my chair as the first chairman of the management department. So that was pretty nice for me. But you notice I put two logos here. On the left, of course, the Huskers. When I came here, Big 8, then Big 12. Now, over to the Big 10. And of course, that was huge for me, being a Big 10 guy from Iowa, you see. So I thought that was one of the best things that ever happened in my 48 years here, was to become part of the Big 10. And of course, Tom Osborne, next door neighbor, good friend through the years, he had a lot to do with getting us into the Big 10, as did our chancellor, Harvey Perlman, for sure. And Dondi is bringing us from this, Big 12 type department and college to a Big 10 College of Business. And I really mean that, and I've told you that. I really appreciate that you are doing that, and she's doing it. Not only the building, but just the whole mindset of the college now is different than it used to be, because we are one of the elite business schools in the country, no question about it. So all you students, the value of your degree has increased considerably to be part of the Big 10, along with Michigan, Northwestern, right down the list. And so we're part of that, and very proud of it. At least I am. Now, we don't play Oklahoma as much. I agree with that, but I'm willing to forgo that. So anyway, that's kind of the roots there, some of the background. And then here's the real background, though. And that's my family, some of which are here. That's out of Branch Oak Lake. No, that's North Beach in Hawaii. But we've got the groupings. I thought I'm going to tell you whether you want to know it or not. The grouping on the left there are the nobles in town here. My granddaughter's sitting here in the middle. She's the one on the far left there in her cheerleader pose there. But and then Todd, he's here today. He's a math teacher at East. And my daughter, Kristen, who's a reading recovery teacher. I've always said that that's the most important job that our family has, reading recovery for youngsters having problems in reading. And then, of course, our other granddaughter, oldest granddaughter, and she's a sophomore at UNL. She's in class, but she's going to run over here as soon as she's done at 4:30, so we'll see if she makes it in the back there. But she's a sophomore. Second grouping there is Kyle. He's the big guy in front here. And my only grandson in this picture is Will, and his name is Will Freddie, so of course he's a little special. And his wife, Dina, who's a grade school teacher, and then Emma, who's also now starting Kearney High School. And then I'll come back to those two in the middle, those old ones. But then there's Brett's family, his gathering there with Angie, who's here with him, and Brett's a professor, as is Kyle. Kyle's at UNK, Brett's at Missouri Western. And his wife Angie here, she works for John Deere. You know, Bill Root's got a big deer plant there in Cedar Falls. And then also their two daughters, Ashley and Molly. And then on the right, my youngest, Paige and her husband Barry, and there's little Lena. But here's the crown jewel, who wasn't there when the picture was taken. He was not born yet, but he's 4 months in that picture, but the 97th percentile in height and weight. So he's a big little guy. So anyway, that's the crew, and then again, you know, in the middle of all that is Kay. And of course, I can't say enough about that, and they would all verify she's the one that runs that group right there. So anyway, that's the family, and I had to get that in just because. Why not? But Nebraska is my home, not Iowa, but Nebraska is where I'm at, and that's what I love about Nebraska, is their legacy of giving and positivity. And some of you, of course, know, a lot of you know about the North Platte canteen, but I'm going to tell you about it again anyway. And Tammy is there, she's from North Platte, so she knows this story. But the North Platte canteen is an unbelievable Nebraska story. And it's really the kind of legacy that I like a lot and I always use. And just look at the smiles on their faces there. But anyway, here's the story real quick, is that they had 10 days after Pearl Harbor, troop trains coming through North Platte, Nebraska. Why North Platte? Because that's a main stop on the UP. So all the trains going west to be shipped over to the Japanese campaign, all the trains going east, going through that same North Platte canteen. They were going off to Europe campaign, and the North Platte, under one of the brothers of the soldiers going over, her name was Ray Wilson. She, young woman, 26 years old, she decided, let's give them a nice send-off before they go off to war. So she put together then the women of North Platte, young ladies and women, and they put together then a little taste of home out of their hides, because of course they were on ration stamps. They had very limited sugar and stuff like that, but they put together cookies, sandwiches, cakes, stuff like that. And so they waited, and they were told not exactly what time the train was coming in, because that was wartime. So they wouldn't tell them exact time come in, so they waited. Finally in comes a train, whistle blows, comes into town. Oh, they're not the Nebraska boys. They're from Kansas. We don't like Kansas. But they thought, wow, they're going off to war too. So they gave them all their stuff, all their cookies, and unloaded on these young Kansas boys. And they felt so gratified, giving, received by giving, that they decided, hey, let's do this for all the troop trains. And that amounted to, over the next 4 years, actually from 1941 to 1946, so almost 5 years, 6 million servicemen that they served. 6 million. Up to 24 trains a day, okay? Unbelievable. They didn't miss one train, and of course the North Platte couldn't handle that, so they expanded out to 125 different cities in Nebraska. So darn near everybody of that age group knew about the North Platte canteen and contributed. 55,000 volunteers. What a story. I think it's just a great, and again, I know a lot of you know that story, but hear it again, because it's a good one, okay? So anyway, here they are handing out goodies. You notice I like that Lucky Strike that they're handing out there. I'd be smoking if I was going over there, I'll tell you that. And then, of course, just the positivity in action. Look at the smiles on those faces. Even that kind of guy, the second one from the right, he's still got a smile on his face. And you notice what they're drinking? White Russians. No. Milk. But anyway, they're all having fun there at the North Platte canteen. Now that kind of set the tone in my own, thinking about positivity and the importance of all that kind of stuff. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of the the phases of my career, because in 48 years like this, there's different parts of the career here, and I'll give you the whole idea of how I developed this different streams of thought, and that starts with this organizational behavior field, as Dondi mentioned. We didn't have organizational behavior when I was in school. We didn't have a program in that. We didn't have a course called that. We didn't have a book called that. We had some books that were readings books that were called that, but not a whole textbook. So the trigger for that for me actually was when I was a student at the University of Iowa, I had a choice of what I was going to minor in. And all my colleagues minored in economics. Everybody used economics as their foundation in supporting coursework. I made the choice of minoring in psychology. That was the trigger moment, probably the best thing I ever did in terms of developing then this merger, this confluence between psychology and management. So that's what I did with that trigger moment in developing organizational behavior. And then, as I'll tell you, spent 4 years developing that book every night while Kay had responsibilities for those 4 little kids. I was up in the closet turned into an office, grinding out that book 4 years. And then, of course, I became this field of organizational behavior modification. OB-MOD, I called it. And that was triggered by a psychiatrist in town by the name of Robert Osborne. That Osborne name comes up. But Bob Osborne was a psychiatrist, MD, and I worked for him as a management consultant going around the state with the Nebraska mental health system. And we would go around, and I'd talk about management by objectives and all that kind of good stuff at the time. And in one of our drives from Lincoln Regional Center to Hastings to Norfolk to even out to Scottsbluff, because they had those regional centers at the time, he said, "Fred, I don't understand why you don't use behavioral technology, that you don't use behavior modification, that we're getting such success out of our patients with in our clinical side of the house." And I thought, you know what? It hit me like a ton of bricks. Why don't we use behavioral technology in the field of management or in the field of human resource management? So that literally, wow, I'm going to do that. I was going to take behavioral psychology to the workplace, and I'll show you how I did that through the strategy. Another one that I had, kind of an in-betweener here, was managerial behavior and what I called real managers. And this was because I was concerned, what do managers really do? What the textbooks say they do, is that what they really do? And then there was a trigger moment for me in a book by Henry Mintzberg called The Nature of Managerial Work that I thought, wow, they're not doing what the textbooks say they're doing. So that kind of triggered in me another research stream. And then the final one here was the positive organizational behavior stuff. And that was, I was lucky enough to be working for Gallup at the time as a senior research scientist. So the first Positive Psychology Summit was held in Lincoln, Nebraska. Why? Because Don Clifton, who of course has a lot of legacy in Nebraska here, was doing strengths-based consulting, and he said, wow, I think we can take this positive psychology that they were talking about at the American Psychological Association in 1998 by Martin Seligman, when he said, let's look at what's right with people, not what just is wrong with people. So Don Clifton literally went up to Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, 1998, and said, why don't you hold a conference here in Lincoln? And I'll support that. Of course, what did Seligman say? Sure, sounds good to me. So he then came out with the first Positive Psychology Summit. I'm sitting as a Gallup senior scientist watching that, and the light bulb went on again. Why don't we take positive psychology to the workplace? Because they were again talking about clinical application, okay? So that was kind of the trigger moments of my 4 major streams of thought. Now, the strategy was to come up with a new concept or a new approach and coin the term, which I did. I coined the term OB-MOD, I coined the term real managers, and I coined the term. I didn't coin the term organizational behavior. I'm not that bold, you know. I'm not that Brian Williamish. But I did not coin organizational behavior, but I did coin OB mod and then positive organizational behavior and PsyCap. So that's what we did, and then of course to get into quite broad streams of research rather than just a narrow stream, I chose to do more of a broad stream and then have the streams contributing to and branching off from that. So the new ideas that I had though had to be accepted, and I did that through established theories, okay? So in the OB field, one of my close colleagues who was older than me and still remains one of my very closest friends, is Lyman Porter. And so he was doing the OB stuff in research, and I kind of then took after him in terms of his theories and his approach to the field. He was actually interviewed here for provost at the University of Nebraska many years ago, but didn't end up doing it. And then, of course, Albert Bandura, and I'll talk about Bandura in a second. And then in the OB mod, of course, I used Skinnerian operant conditioning. And then Bandura expanded on that. I followed his lead again. The real managers, as I said, was Mintzberg. And then I did do some qualitative research that hadn't been done at the time. And then this POB and PsyCap stuff came out of positive psychology through the work of Seligman, Ed Diener, who was both on the Gallup senior scientist with me, and then Bandura. So now why is Bandura a common thread here? Because he went through the program that I did at Iowa only a decade before I did. And he is generally recognized as the most famous, the most heaviest contributor to the entire behavioral sciences is Albert Bandura. His whole career, like mine has been at Nebraska, he's been at Stanford. So he's still active, by the way, and he's 10 years older than I am. But anyway, the point being, though, that he has always been my mentor, my leader, and I've never been ashamed to just follow in after what Bandura is doing. And nobody ever argues with that, by the way, which is a good thing. Now, the strategies continued here was that not only do you have to have something new, coin the term, start doing the streams of research, but you have to have a book on it. Just having an article won't get it done. There's a lot of great articles that never see the light of day, but you get a book out for exposure and branding, and that's what I always had to do. So I got the book out on organizational behavior, at least one of the first, if not the first, mainline text. Now sometimes that mainline gets lost in translation, but there were some textbooks out there, but they were, like I said, case books, or they were in the psych departments, but not the first OB textbook. I had it, 1973. I also then did my book in organizational behavior modification, 1975, to get that branded and out there. I did the book on real managers, which I got caught in a change in publishers, so that never really got the exposure. But right now, this Robert Hogan, who's a well-known leadership professor in Tulsa, he's so thrilled with what he's found in real managers 3 months ago that he wants to republish the book. And that was 1985. So he's republishing this book. I said, sure, go ahead. And then, of course, the PsyCap book, which is a brand new one. That particular version here just came out a couple of weeks ago, but I did the original one in 2007. And of course, I had co-authors, as you can see, on all but the first one. Bob Kreitner, doctoral student. Hodges, a colleague here at Nebraska for 17 years. And Rosenkrantz, a former doctoral student. And then with PsyCap, I had Carolyn Yusuf, a former doctoral student, played a major role in all this, as well as Bruce Avolio. So those are the books. But here's my favorite coming up. This one. The 13th edition of Organizational Behavior with a guy named Brett. Where is Brett? There he is. And a guy named Kyle as the co-authors. So that's what the best book for me is, because people say, well, you live your legacy through your kids. Well, literally in this case, I'm going to have them carry on the legacy of the org behavior book. So that's the 13th edition. I can't get a better picture than that because it's still in page proof. So that's the best we could do. Now, you also have to have a passion, and this is where Dondi has set the tone in the college as well. You have to have a passion for basic research in order to move ahead. And so I had that passion all along in terms of being, have an evidence-based credibility in the top journals. So just not to go through that with you, of course I'll put you to sleep very fast. But the key here is that I always have done that. Starting in that top one there, I had several years ago at least, they did a survey of how many people published in our top 2 journals, Academy Management Journal, Academy Management Review, and it came out that I was the 5th most in the history of the Academy. But interestingly, I had those journals in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So over each decade, I had top-level journals. In other words, kind of sustained. Then I did the OB Mod stuff in the very top journals, and actually was voted as one of the top, not ranked 8th, but one of the top 8 in the entire field of organizational behavior in a survey of Academy members voted. And then the real manager stuff. This efficacy and performance with a 0.38 correlation actually is the highest of any other meta-analysis, meaning all studies averaged, with performance none higher. Not goal setting, not feedback, some of the stuff you guys are studying in your courses right now. At 0.38 is the highest, but that's still only about 15%. 85% still goes into the performance other than efficacy or confidence. That has over 2,000 citations. That's a lot of citations. I'll show you this in a minute. And then, of course, this recent stuff in positive psychology applied to the workplace, that's having the most citations. And I just pulled this out of Google Scholar and put it on there. So I have 28,000 citations, 17,000 since 2010. Now that means that that's all the PsyCap stuff, more or less, because that's been out there since 2007. But the H index is 77. That doesn't mean anything to you guys, but what that really means is that I have at least 77 articles that have 77 citations. And then that 10 index is that I have 175 articles with 10 or more citations. So I don't like to brag, really? As Kay said, one of her friends asked her, was Fred nervous about doing this? She says, hell no, Kay, Fred loves to talk about himself. So anyway, the point with the graph at the bottom, though, is that I'm kind of retiring at the pinnacle of my career, and that's how we measure is impact, okay? While I was setting this up the other day, a political science professor actually was in here, and she said to me, oh, that's how we do all evaluations in arts and sciences now, is through H factor and citations. So I said, does anybody have anything like that? No. Okay, so anyway, also applied research is part of my strategy. So that's why I've edited Orgodynamics, which is a translation journal, taking basic research to the practicing manager. In that journal for 25 years, I've edited that journal. And of course, creative, hardworking, and talented doctoral students. And of course, who do I put in there and who do I leave out? But I'm just giving you a representative example here. I didn't include Bill Rood. I didn't include Steve Varner here. I didn't include Sam Nelson, etc. But the key here is I just got some pictures. And Bob Kreitner, Mark Martinko, people in the field of management know who they are. And then, of course, Gwen, we all know, because Gwen she's in the back there. Gwen was a former student of mine, but Gwen also was my boss not too long ago as chairman of the management department. And she also, of course, has been a terrific contributor not only to our department, but to the university, to the state, LPS, etc. Gwen has been a real contributor to all of us in this state. Elena is another student of mine, and most of these students in here have Elena right now. And she was actually, her dissertation ended up in the top tier journal. Alex has that 2000 with me, 2000 citation. He took the lead in that actually, and he's a professor at University of Wisconsin. Diane Welsh is a well-known entrepreneurship person. Suzanne Peterson at Arizona State. Carolyn, who I've already mentioned, is just great. She's got the only endowed chair up at Bellevue here, but she is a very big supporter of mine, but also has contributed much to what I've done. And the same with James Avey. And then where's Lay at? Right, he's in the back there, but he's my most recent. And Lay, of course, helped me put these slides all together as well. And he is just graduated a week ago, defended his dissertation, and he's going to Auburn University. And he's making more in 1 month than I made when I came to Nebraska. So that's how things have changed. And about 65 others, give or take. I couldn't have done it without him. That's very sincere. Couldn't have done it without him. And then, of course, I still have that passion for OB-MOD that I started telling you about, which is, positive reinforcement to improve individual behavior based upon the established work in operant and behavioral psychology. And I'm not going to go through that with you other than to say that you get what you reward, okay? So if you want to have change, you've got to reward change. If you want to have teamwork, you have to reward teamwork. If you want anything you have to, you want to have done, you have to reward it. So you get what you reward. That's as simple as I can get it. But we, of course, have performance models and things like that. And we did the basic research on these models in this OB-MOD approach. And here's just an example of the kind of research we've done. Experimental design at Frito-Lay, where we took a experimental group that went through the OB-MOD training and 5-step performance model that we have, versus a randomly selected control group that did not go through the training, but everything else is the same. Same equipment, same training, same wages. And you see the OB-MOD then caused the change in performance along the left there that the engineers measured over time, and those points on that upper curve represent record performance in the history of this Frito-Lay plant and several $100,000 of improved productivity at no cost, just by the way they were managing their employee behavior. So there you have it. That's the kind of research we have, and that got a lot of attention. Of course, I'm cherry picking the good ones here. But we do have then the meta-analysis taking all the studies together, and on average then we were able to show in manufacturing we could increase productivity 33% through OB-MOD, and in the service industry, which has a little less defined behaviors, 13%. But look at the financials, are doing the same, but look at the non-financials. Feedback and especially social did as well. So non-financial incentives did as well as the use of money in the performance improvements that we were able to attain. Now, I also have a strategy of doing parallel research, meaning you can't just do the mainstream research, you have to do some other things as well. And my other things were international stuff and then this qualitative real manager stuff. And out of the international, mainly through the efforts again of my now deceased colleague, Richard Hodgetts, we put together this international management book, which I also maintain is the first international management book. There's all kinds of international business books out there and stuff like that before ours. But we did that now in its 9th edition, and it's doing very well still today. And then after a 30-year doing this stuff, I decided, hey, what's new? Because I've done the meta-analysis, I'm going to look at something brand new. And that's where I then got into this paradigm shift of new thinking, moving from radical behaviorism, which OB-MOD was, to this cognitively based positive approach that I called positive organizational behavior and psychological capital. Now, time for another story to get you woke up here again after all that kind of stuff. But this is actually Kay's involved with this story, because we went up to her old Ann 100th birthday in North Dakota. But I read about this same almost exact story here in Nebraska. Anyway, their neighbors up there had a guy who had brain cancer in one of the big wheat farms up there in North Dakota. And so he was telling me about it. One of the guys at the birthday party was telling me, see ya, Orrin. He's the only other guy from Clinton in this room, Orrin Wilson, well-known banker here in Lincoln. Anyway, in this story, they're telling me that the guy had brain cancer, so they finally got a break in the weather, but unannounced. Nobody put out, facts, or they didn't have Facebook or whatever. And they had 21 combines show up on the guy with the brain cancer's property. He said he called his wife, get out here, take a picture of this. So she did. This is the picture. There's 21 combines there because there's some behind there if you're trying to count those. All on his property to bring in his harvest at considerable cost, because those machines, as Angie knows, she sells them at John Deere, a couple $100,000 and more equipment, that this is unbelievable. So she took the picture, sent it into Country Magazine, won the $10,000 first prize for that picture. Of course, her own family, oh wow, what are we going to do with the $10,000? And of course, what did she do? Took it over to the guy with the brain cancer's family. Here's $10,000, you can use this more than we can. So that's the kind of stuff I like on, giving and positivity on the plains. This is Nebraska, this is North Dakota, this is South Dakota, this is Kansas, this is the, the heartland here, and Iowa, Bill. So everyone knows and believes the importance of positivity and happiness by giving, whether that's the North Platte canteen or the combines. And of course, the initial reaction is, well, this stuff is, fine, but it's too fuzzy for study. Too many balloons, too many smile faces to take it as seriously as it should be. So that's where we went to the established theory again, to positive psychology, okay? So this is where Seligman started it all, and this is where they used research then, instead of balloons and smile faces, on the importance of positivity. So positive psychology emphasizes the value of positivity over negativity. This is Barbara Fredrickson, one of the famous positive psychologists, and she uses this analogy actually of a sailing yacht like that, where the mast is the wind beneath your sails type of thing, which is much bigger, much higher. That's positivity. But you still need a keel, and that's the negative side. And the keel, of course, steers the ship, right? And also, if it didn't have the keel, flop over on its side. So you must be realistic. In other words, it's not all positivity. You have to have a keel. You have to have a grounding. And you can't be in this kind of bright-sided, think positive when you're surrounded with something like that. But on the other hand, as a rule of thumb, more positivity is always better than not. And here's some of the research. This has 2,500 citations, another meta-analysis by these positive psychologists who found that there are, in 293 samples, 275,000 participants, that positive, happy people are more successful in their work, in their social relationships, and in their health. Now again, when we say more successful, we're still talking 0.25, 0.3 correlations. There's other things that go into performance at work and social relationships than positivity, but this is certainly better than chance alone and has a big impact. Now, where does this come from? All right, here's a secret that Sonia Lubomirsky, another research psychologist out of the University of California at Riverside, has put together this positivity circle here. And the circle says that what she found from the basic research, now she didn't come out on top of her head with this, she finds that about our positivity, our happiness, about half of that is from our nature and nurture. So it's both genetics and how we were raised as kids. how we were nurtured. So about half of our positivity is given by our genes and by how we were raised as kids, nature and nurture. Only 10% is circumstances. Now, if I gave a little survey here, which I had time to do, I would bet you that most of you would say, well, your positivity depends on, what situation you're in. What's your circumstances? No, 10%. I mean, it matters, but not very much in the scheme of things. So, for example, how much money you make. They actually have a cutoff, about 50,000 in US dollars. If you make less than 50,000, you're not so happy. But if you make more than 50,000, then income doesn't matter that much of how happy you are. So they have study after study, that show, for example, that millionaires are no happier than the people who work for them. Their chauffeurs, their gardeners, their cooks. No happier. You know that you think about that. Yeah, that's true. Age. I'm as happy now as I was when I was young. Age doesn't matter that much. Where you live doesn't matter that much. Whether it be, what country you live in. For example, Northern Europe are usually the highest rated on the Gallup polls and all on levels of happiness and well-being. And, they're pretty well, high income countries. But guess what? So is South America. They're high as well. United States, 17th. China, 92nd. Singapore, last on one of the latest Gallup polls. Now, they'll change a little bit. But those countries, of course, are all doing great economically, but not necessarily, happiness levels as countries. But the same is true for, climate and all that. Doesn't matter that much. And then, of course, the real jewel of this is the intentional piece, that 40%, which is self-determines. What we call the state-like, the key to our PsyCap is you have the choice of whether you're going to be positive or not. That's 40%. Okay? And that's, can't do much about the set point. That's given. Circumstances are overrated. The 40% intentions are the key. Our positivity, our mindset is up to ourselves. We are both products, the 50 and the 10, the majority, but also producers of our own positivity and our own happiness. So I like that slide, and I think that makes a big difference in terms of how we look at things. And it's based on research. She didn't put that together off the top of her head. So mindfulness, like Abe Lincoln, now whether he really said this or not, but he's attributed to this at least. Most people are about as happy as they make up their mind to be. Yeah, makes sense, right? Positivity and happiness is up to you, the 40%. Positive mindset or mindfulness, not mindlessness, live fully in the moment. This Ellen Langer up in the upper right there, she's the first tenured professor in the psychology department at Harvard. She and I gave programs together in China, and I really like her stuff. Some real neat research that she's done on this. So this positive mindset is the antecedent for our POB and our PsyCap. So if we take my stuff on POB and draw from positive psychology, that forms PsyCap. And again, remember, I'm from the Mississippi River, as Les Digman is there. And that kind of reminds me of the Mississippi. Not quite that nice, but that's what I'm using. I'm saying it, I believe it. Now, to differentiate from other types of traditional capital, we first of all, of course, have economic and financial capital. This is what our whole business school is based on, is economic and financial capital. I see Anne Marie back there, so if she can help me out on this. But this is what we, and I'm not putting this down, believe me, we have to have that. And then another form of capital is human capital. That's what, like Gwen Combs and myself and others in the HR field are using for, the importance of human capital. What you and your staff know, your experience, your education, your implicit knowledge, etc. Then we have this new kind of field called social capital, which is the importance of relationships and networks. And then we have psychological capital. Intentions, that 40% piece of who you are and who you and your staff can become. So this is the basis of what we're doing. Now the key here is that they don't flow necessarily from each other, and I'm not saying that this is a rational evolution. I'm just saying how ours compares to the others, okay? So we must meet the scientific criteria to be included into PsyCap. Be based on theory and research, number one. Number two, have valid measurement in the published literature. Number three, be open to change and development, or what I call state-like. And number four, have performance impact. Because I am in the business school. I'm not in the psychology department. So I have to show what can we do to improve performance. Okay? So the criteria that I set up deliberately to make this, have meaningful sustainability is that I searched the literature in positive psychology, and one that met my scientific criteria was the construct of hope. Hope is used in everyday language. It wasn't used in the management field, but it was used in positive psychology. So hope is both the will and the way. It's got theory, it's got research, it's got measurement, it's open to development, and it can show impact. Efficacy, that's my biggie. That 0.38 that I told you about earlier. Confidence, very big. Resiliency, very important to the times. Bouncing back and beyond. And then optimism. Positive attributions on success and failure, and future expectations are always, looking on the bright side of things. So those are the four that best met my criteria that I set up. And guess what? That stands for HERO. And I didn't set it up that way. In fact, I didn't even come up with the HERO acronym until, a couple years actually into this stuff. So the HERO acronym, and of course that's my other, beside Albert Bandura, my other hero is Nelson Mandela. And I go to South Africa, and of course they love this stuff. And in fact, I've done an article with Wayne Cassio on the importance of what Mandela did in the metamorphosis at Robben Island when he was in prison camp there. And also, I'm at least on a finalist for honorary doctorate at Nelson Mandela University. We'll see if I get that, I don't know, but I'm on the final list at least. Again, the basic research strategy. Empirical work from all kinds of different areas, all kinds of different places. So, all types of US, Asian, European organizations. We've had 2,500, more than that now, formal requests for our questionnaire. That means we have at least 2,500 studies going around the United States and the world, and a lot of them around the world, on PsyCap. Those are people who bothered to ask for our questionnaire. So that means there's a heck of a lot more studies than that, because they just rip you off and use it without getting permission. I've done it with sales associates. We've done this work with sales associates, bank employees, aerospace specifically, Boeing, entrepreneurs, insurance services, team level at both bank branches as well as operations and maintenance teams, restaurant chains, wide cross-section of firms. That's where we get most of our studies, of course, on a cross-section, which is, has some problems, but that's how we get data. And then, of course, healthcare and education, which Brett and Kyle are kind of carved out for themselves in the research. I haven't done that, but they have. So this is what, an example of where we're drawing from. And again, we did the meta-analysis. 51 studies, 12,567 participants in those 51 studies, and we get a 0.3 correlation. Now that's as high as we get with performance. And that's pretty impressive with a meta-analysis. Average performance, PsyCap related to performance in those kinds of organizations. And I'm not going to bore you with the statistics here, but we also have PsyCap related, of course, higher to attitudes and behaviors in the workplace. Now, most of this meta-analysis is correlational, but we also have causal evidence through our experiments and longitudinal studies that we can show that PsyCap does have causal impact on performance. And we also have a lot of now favorable reviews from outsiders, i.e. not part of Fred Luthans' students or colleagues, that are giving us very favorable reviews in good journals. I'm not going to go through that, but I just want you to know that we are doing continuing research, just to hopefully impress my colleagues at least. That these studies are all either very recent or ongoing. And some of them are getting real sophisticated at this point in the refinements. I will mention at the very top in red there that festschrift that I had. Again, I thank Dondi for supporting that, which is a great event for me. It turned out to be a roast of Fred. But what it was it's actually a loose translation in the German is a festival of writing. So I was able to call in and all my colleagues and wine and dine them on college budget to have a festival, and I obviously I'm lucky to have both that and this, so I appreciate that. Now, beside attitudes, behaviors, and performance, is the other part of PsyCap is that it's open for development, okay? So, this separates the PsyCap from the trait-like personalities, which don't change after about age 30, give or take. Strengths, like Gallup talks about, you don't develop strengths, they'll say that. Talents and the neurogenetic hardwiring that people have. But our stuff you can change. That's one of my criteria. And that's, of course, huge for getting performance impact. So on the continuum, you've got these moods on the left, very fleeting moods, feelings, emotions. And then on the right of PsyCap, you've got the personalities and strengths, and then on the far right, you've got the hardwiring and the neuropsychology type stuff. So we're on the state-like side, i.e. we can change this stuff. We can change your PsyCap. Hopefully today, some of you are going through some change. And why PsyCap development? Because again, it makes you're more creative, better health, better relationships, and of course, what I mostly concentrate on, better work attitudes and performance. I do have to tell you one more study, and I'm running out of time here, but even the length of your life. So these nuns, there's the sophomore, coming from class. So the length of your life can even be improved through PsyCap. So I love the nun study. 180 nuns went into the convent when they were young, 22 years of age average, and wrote about why they entered the convent. Then, many years later, they looked at those autobiographies and categorized them of they were either negative, I'm entering the convent because this is my last chance, I've tried suicide, I'm going to now try to be a nun. Neutral, my mother wanted me to be a nun, so that's why I'm coming in. Or positive, I love Jesus, I'm going to this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And then they pulled those out, and guess what? Those who were positive lived on average, now on average of course, 10 years longer than those who were negative. And the beauty of this study is everything else was the same. This was a convent where they ate the exact same food, did the exact same activities. It was a pure experiment that we could show that positivity caused their life to be 10 years, on average 10 years longer. That's pretty cool stuff. And then of course this is some of the work that we're extending PsyCap into the well-being, both in terms of relationships, both soft measures and hard measures. Health, look at this one even. The higher your PsyCap, the lower your cholesterol level, in a study that we've done, published in the literature. The higher your PsyCap, the lower your BMI. That's good stuff. And then of course, like I said, well-being is my triangle of well-being of you got to do work, you've got to do relationships, and you got to do health. And they all interact with each other to lead to your well-being. You have to have a balance in order to do well, to have well-being. And so the idea here is you can emphasize one over the other, but the key is that you can't ignore any one of the 3 points and have well-being. Now, here are just an example of one of the assignments we give our people to increase their personal PsyCap is we just have them go out and every day they must do 3 positive things for somebody else. And we even tell them to put rubber bands on their left wrist, and every time they do one, they take it and put it on the right wrist to remind them, you know, have you done your 3 good things today? Sincerity is the core. And my OB mod research found that that kind of social reinforcement really does work. You can do this gratitude letter, like I did my old aunt right before she died. I'm so happy I did that. Why? Because it made me feel good, and let alone put her into tears. So do a gratitude letter to deserving others. And this is some of the training work that we do on HR development, and I'm not going to go through that other than to tell you this is not rocket science. It's just good old goal setting and stuff like that where we can increase and target each of the 4 components of PsyCap. Here's a hope development one. Rick Snyder shared all of his manuals with us to develop these, ways to increase people's hope level. So we did all these published studies to show both experimental and longitudinal that performance actually is caused by PsyCap. And that is one of the studies that we have, which was at Boeing, which is working on the 787. Little cost overrun there, Mark, but other than that, still pretty cool aircraft. Here's where we put it into dollars and cents. Now, I'm not going to go through that formula with you other than to show you we do have formulas in this field too. And we do have a return on investment of the return minus the cost over the cost. I did retain that out of my accounting class as an undergraduate. And that gives us, in our Boeing example, with real data, with real people using our training program, a 270% return on investment. Wow. These finance people are so thrilled if they can get 20% return on their investment. 270. Okay, I confronted one of my colleagues, well, you're making robust assumptions, Fred. I'm saying, you're not? But my point is, okay, it's only 200% then. But that's pretty significant, and that gets attention. Dollars and cents. I'm almost done. Here's where we applied it then, just a few of the examples. We're working right now at NASA. We've worked with Burger King. We're working with China Mobile. And we're using this in PTSD, for example, in PsyCap. So it's got wide application. And my colleague Peter Harms has done a lot of this work, but I'm on it with him. So here's the reaction we're getting. This is the Indonesian billboard, and you notice in the background there, just happened to be there. Fortuitous again. And you also see that A&W sign over there. That's Jakarta, Indonesia, on a marketing firm over there. This is in Beijing, China, Psychological Capital, Mastering the Art of Happiness. And that's Wei Xing Li, one of my former doctoral students who also, of course, taught here for many years. He's my interpreter. And then working at China Mobile, 500,000 employees. They take this all over China through their TV network to do the PsyCap training. So we're taking it all around the world, mostly Asia, like I said, but also South Africa and Europe. So Kay's been on most of these trips with me. Norway, her heritage, Finland, England, South Africa, Italy, France, Lithuania. These are just some of the recent programs that we're running around the world. And of course, where do we go from here? I'm going to concentrate on that left one. We're still doing inquiry rather than advocacy. That's a big deal, meaning that we're not saying people should do this. We're saying that we're still discovering and will continue to discover in this journey that we're on to get to performance impact and the bottom line. So those are just some of the ways where we're going from here. So I'm not saying that PsyCap is the answer. We have too much research, though, to ignore it or write it off as just too soft or just another fad. So hopefully we're moving the needle from this kind of important but naive happiness on the left there to an academically based PsyCap. Okay? So, with our PsyCap, we can be on top of the world, and may the PsyCap force be with you. Okay. I think I can land at least in 1 or 2 questions.
Have you done a study where you measured positive versus negative psychology with a control group?
We have not, but the positive psychology people have. And the idea being that, as I showed you in that one slide, they're pretty well, have evidence that positivity is doing better than negativity. But in the literature, 16-to-1 ratio of negative studies versus positive studies, 16-to-1, because they can do that kind of search. So there's 16 studies on depression, anxiety, anger, 1 study on joy, happiness. 16-to-1. So all we're trying to do is not replace the negative, but to try to get a little bit more in balance. Any other questions?
Is this going to be on the final?
For you, yes, Les.
Okay, I'd like to say in closing, Fred,
Yeah.
Great universities are great because of great faculty. And you have been doing this your entire career. I wish every assistant professor, every doctoral student could have heard this. I wish you were starting your career now while I'm the dean.
Thank you.
And it's an honor to watch you and to learn from you. And thank you for everything.
Thank you so much. I mean that, Donnie.
Thank you all very
Thanks.
much. Let's give Fred another round of applause.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.